Hi, I'm Jeff Nelder,
And I'm Charlie Nguyen.
and this is Job Ready Podcast. Welcome. Today we have Dana Stephenson, the co-founder and CEO of Ripen. Welcome, Dana.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you here. Our style is to jump right into a conversation like we're sitting around a table together, which we kind of are virtually today. But, when we talked before, Dana, it seemed really foundational, this idea of the messy middle to you. And, I needed to double click to understand that. But I think for our conversation today and really what drives you and inspires you with Ripen, can you ground us in the messy middle?
Sure. So, there's a couple of ways that we think about that. And of course, we're an education technology company. We're trying to really bridge the gap between education and industry. There is a very messy middle between those two. Uh, Often there's a lot of challenges out there where employers are pointing the finger at academic institutions and feeling like academic institutions could do more to better prepare learners for the future of work and the talent needs of organizations. Often academic institutions are pointing the finger over at employers and pointing the finger and saying, hey, this is a job that you need to spend more time, more resources, really investing in the training. And once we bring folks to you with a sense of purpose and socially engaged citizens who have better career clarity, that you can train them in more of the technical skills that are in high demand once you get them. But I think when we look at this messy middle between those, if we just keep pointing fingers back at each other, we're going to get nowhere fast pretty quickly. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we bring those folks together? How do we bring industry, working with faculty, working with academic institutions, working with deans and provosts, and really thinking through designing programs where everyone's involved and creating a very rich and engaging experience, setting students up for success, setting students up to work on problems where they can take what they're learning in the classroom and apply it in a real world setting and solve real business solutions in their community and around the world. And that's messy. I mean, there's no, compared to what many students are used to, where you are offered a project and a program, and there's the assignments that you've been given throughout your education pathway. There's a right answer, wrong answer. In this type of programming and this kind of learning experience, there is no right or wrong answer. It's messy. It's digging in and dealing with this uncertainty and ambiguity of where this might go. Much like the real world. And let's be honest, we are preparing learners today for a world that we don't know what that will look like. The skills that are needed are rapidly changing faster than ever before. And so, I think we're thinking an enormous amount about that messy middle. How do we bring that together? And of course, that messy middle blends into our own home lives and everything beyond.
Hey,
Wow.
before we go into sort of solutioneering, and by the way, I love the messy middle. I love how you frame it. Makes perfect sense. I mean, we've been talking about the gap. It's not as sexy as interesting as a messy middle between higher ed and industry for a number of years, but love to kind of get you both to react to this. Do you think the messy middle is the primary driver for why the job prospect for recent grads, as well as, in recent as in this year, as well as less recent in terms of the last 5 to 10 years, is not looking so good right now? I mean, we're seeing some incredible stats. uh, Almost 6% unemployment rate for grad this year, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. 12% unemployment rate for grads in their 20, right? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 52% underemployment rate for grads in the last 5 years, according to Strata and Bernie Glass. I mean, the job prospect, again, is pretty bleak. I love to get you both to react to. Do you think the messy middle is the cause for that, or is something else?
Well, I think the there's a lot of causes, but realistically, I mean, when we first started thinking about this, when we came up with this idea back in 2012, I mean, at that time, we were already looking back at our parents' generation and comparing it to, when we were in school, and the idea of our parents who, graduated with a degree and had a credential, and that was what it took to get a job, and then usually stayed in that job for 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20, 30 years, that just didn't feel like the world that we were graduating into. We already could see that we were going to have many different jobs in the first 10 years of our professional careers. This is changing even more rapidly. And I think that's what industry is really noticing, is that roles are shifting very quickly. The skills within those roles are shifting really quickly. And so higher education really needs to really figure out, how are we preparing learners to be successful in a world where things can change, and your role might change, and the skills that are needed will change, and you will likely have to career transition throughout your employer pathway. And so employers are coming in and looking at this and going, we need to figure out whether these students how are these students developing these durable skills, these transferable skills, communication, critical thinking, creativity, especially with the world of AI, which of course is a huge reason why I'm sure we'll get into that, of why some of the challenges are in the job market for individuals. The skills of how to use human judgment in a world of AI. And so this messy middle is certainly leading to it, but I think the real thing is that we're just seeing rapid change at a pace that we haven't seen before, and individuals are going to have to rapidly change throughout their educational careers and learn and unlearn and then relearn more frequently than they've ever had to before. And that's creating a lot of pressure, which is leading to why this messy middle is messier than before, if that makes sense.
Man, oh man, learn, unlearn, relearn. It has always been the case. I think you coined that particular phrase, which I love, Dana, but it's accelerating, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it accelerate with AI. It's interesting that uh, with AI, you can't look into the code and see exactly why things happen. It's almost symbolic of the impact that AI is having, and the ambiguity that it's creating towards what are we going to do next. So, Charlie, your question's especially interesting. Gen Z seems to be a culture that the generations who currently occupy managerial positions, the hiring managers, don't necessarily know what to do with, right? And so there's a level of ambiguity for those hiring managers that they're responding to with a resistance, it seems like, overall. And then there is there seems to be the more understanding that's created, there seems to be an effect of feeling like I have more of a handle on this. So I wonder, Dana, in your experience, this whole Gen Z, the generational divide, and bridging that with the people that you've seen entering the workplace, does more experience through observing someone's working habits, like in an experiential learning context, does that seem to create more receptivity to the Gen Z culture as it's represented with, hiring managers?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no doubt that when our learners go out into the workforce and have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 project-based experiences on their portfolio with skills that have been tagged to that, skills that have been verified, feedback that is really authentic, that really describes how the students engaged in the project, overcame challenges, that really helps set themselves apart, and gives to your point, gives a lot of confidence in the hiring managers and making a hiring decision, because it wasn't just a resume that a student probably realistically made with AI. This is something that was developed and evolved as they were doing real experiences, and then it was authenticated by employers who were engaging in those experiences. But I think what's more important is how the students are, the confidence that this is building for these students, and the ability for these students to be able to articulate the skills that they've learned throughout their education pathway. That for what we hear over and over and over again, feeling armed going into an interview process with real examples that they can draw upon, where they are faced with a challenge, had to handle that challenge, learn something new, what they did with that learning, having those real examples that don't necessarily feel as canned from just like interview prep and practice. I think we'd be able to break that down for employers with a high degree of confidence. I think that is one of the most powerful tools that students get out of this.
So experience generates a comfort with ambiguity in that case. Is that kind of is that pouring
That's right.
fuel on the fire?
Yeah. So and I think a piece of the messy middle is that, so many, you're seeing a ton of art. I'm sure many people, many listeners have seen, you're seeing a ton of articles coming out these days that, now, I mean, I'm sure this existed before, but it's really being highlighted now that a lot of students, for the most part, because of the way education has been standardized and grades and the way that students are tested, that they have often seen these assignments less as a learning opportunity, an opportunity for cognitive development and exploration, as just literally seeing it as a logistical hurdle to get through. So I'm going to just go and use the fastest way that I can get through. I can use AI, and of course I'm going to use AI. It gets simpler, but then it just really becomes, these exams become this memorization and regurgitation. These assignments become, let's use the fastest tools, which we all know, if you're just using AI without thinking critically about it, if you're not getting, getting that friction ahead of time, there's lots of studies coming out saying that's cognitive offloading. And so you're kind of just like passively going through education. And we're wondering why we have one of the least engaged groups coming through our education pathways. The real power of this kind of form of work-based learning, where in the classroom, you're all of a sudden, instead of being given an assignment which you can go and just work on your own, you're put into a group and you're said, okay, here, we're going to match to an organization. They're going to come with a problem that's going to be related to the content, what you've learned as part of this course, and a lot of what you've learned coming up to this point. But you know what? That could have completely evolved during the course. You're going to have to go in and find out what the real problem is. And as you go through it, and you engage with the employer, you might uncover new things, and new data might come out, and you might pivot and take new pathways. They might give you a whole bunch of feedback that's going to be completely against what you thought, and you're going to have to go in a completely different direction. And so the ability to, as students, to build that adaptive capacity, to build that comfort in ambiguity, that resiliency, those are skill sets that employers are going, my gosh, amazing. We don't need these people who can just come in and just start coding or selling, immediately. We need team members who are ready to come in, and when challenges come about and as things starts to change, they're ready to take those challenges head on, and they're going to take a leadership, entrepreneurial mindset, and they're going to really help our organization overcome those and grow with us. That, I think, is what organizations are just saying over and over again. Where is that kind of energy and enthusiasm coming out of these higher education institutions? Like, I think we're seeing a lot of evidence that these kinds of project-based experiences are inspiring that kind of energy, that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of entrepreneurial mindset all over again.
Dana, I'd love to dive into kind of Ripen solution a little bit, because I think what you guys do in there is pretty amazing. But I want to bring us back to this conversation about the messy middle, and it takes two to tango, but somebody got to start it, right? And so
yes,
we talk about previously, as long as I can remember in my professional life in 25 years in higher ed, we've heard about, and to your point earlier, employers pointing fingers at higher ed and higher ed pointing fingers at employers. Today is very different because the last 25 plus years didn't have AI. Today is smack dab in the middle.
totally.
I would love for both of you to take a position on this. If you have to solve this messy middle, and knowing that you don't get to bring both parties to the dance here, what is the crank? Is that the higher ed that can initiate things on higher ed side to solve the messy middle, or is it the employer that can initiate things to solve the middle? I have a position, but I want to hear yours first before I challenge it.
Well,
or not?
I'm very interested to hear your position on this. I mean, the way that we have approached this is that it's a co-creation. One of the things that we've learned is that our academic institutions, our educators, they are the best at knowing where their students are. What else is going on in their lives? What other challenges they might be facing? Depending on the target the population at the institution. Are some of them holding other jobs, or do they have lots of other extracurricular? Is they have very heavy work, coursework loads? So putting the educator in the driver's seat to really kind of understand, what capacity the students have, what level are they at, what project would make sense based on what they're learning to really set them up for success, helps create a lot of sort of guardrails to create a high quality experience. But then you really want the context and the challenge and the ideas and the curveballs, if you will, to come from industry. And then when you start to pull those things together, a little bit of co-creation happens to kind of massage it and make sure it's a good fit. And that's where we create, an exciting solution for students, where there's this opportunity for forced ambiguity and helping students, really prepare for a world of uncertainty and develop the skills of resiliency and everything that we've been talking about. But you've got some guardrails on that to really ensure that this is going to be an authentic learning experience that aligns with the learning objectives of a program, is going to set the students up for success, and is really going to help build upon their skills and set them up for the next path in their education pathway, rather than, and be comfortable feeling safe in an environment that feels safe. So if you do make mistakes, that's not failure. You learn from those mistakes. It's a learning experience, and then you can take that to the next level. So for us, it's always been both have to be really involved in it. We've tended often to start with the academic side to sort of bring those on board. And in our world, there's more than enough employers. There's more than enough employers that if they're given the opportunity to be invited in, and invited in a way that aligns with what I've described, where there's a co-creation and they get some control over the problems and the work that the students are going to be working on, there's more than enough that are going to be interested. And so that kind of pointing fingers and saying that companies have to invest more, I always take a little bit of a challenge to that, because there are more than enough employers. We just got to create the right environments that help our academic institutions and feel comfortable, setting the students up for success, and then creating the opportunity for them to get together.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, it's the academic that has to initiate that crank, and then the employer can drive that crank. The industry can drive that crank.
I think that's how we've always sort of really seen it, is that the academic institution gets, ultimately at the end of the day, they're the ones that are bringing the students to the table. And so we start with them, they understand their students, and then the employers, we feed into the system, and they're the ones who really create these really innovative experiences for the students.
Jeff, what about you?
I'm hearing Dana say, it's not the chicken or the egg, it's the chicken and the egg. And I don't know who is the chicken and who is the egg, but we're going to get them working together. And I agree with that, Dana. Before we got on live today, we were talking about, kind of the core lesson of improv, that and how it helps you face this life of unending challenges, right? Your professional life is a life of, otherwise nobody's going to pay you. Right? They're paying you to solve unending challenges. And you can either look at that as torture, which is not a comfort with ambiguity, or you can look at that as a series of opportunities. And if it's a series of opportunities, then yes and becomes very powerful, right? So when I say it's the chicken and the egg, I'm being both facetious.
All right, you guys
and
are playing
not,
it
right?
safe. You guys are playing it safe.
I'm not playing it safe, Charlie. Charlie, not playing it safe at all.
Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
My position is, I think AI obviously changed the narrative and a lot of what we know, and I'll react to kind of where we are today. I firmly believe that if the car is moving, you can steer it. But if a car is not moving, you can't steer it. Right? First of all, it's so hard to turn even steering wheel, and it's not steering because it's not moving. And so when I think through this, I think the conversation has always been about the demand and supply. I never heard anybody say supply and demand. That it's always demand and supply. And in this case, the industry is the demand. Industry is the consumer of skills. Industry is the consumer, is a buyer of talent. And we're seeing almost a standstill, if you will, in terms of the pullback from hiring. And not just because of economic uncertainty, but also because, as you know today, Dana, we're both startup founders here, and you know how 10 years ago, you would have to hire a lot of people to do a lot of different work. Everything from a simple thing as like local design to today where I don't even need an assistant. In fact, AI can get things done much quicker as my admin. And I can have all different tools possible. So in terms of being as an employer, as a demand, that has been reduced significantly, right? And then the supply side, to me, is the academic, is the students, the grads. They always react to the demand. So if the demand say, I need more software engineers, guess what? You're going to see more schools building program curriculum to address that. If the demand say, hey, I need more healthcare talent, guess what? The last few years, you're seeing a bunch of different solutions coming up on that piece. But the demand drives it. And at this moment, I'm not sure if there's a whole lot of activities going on the demand side. I'd
Dana?
love you guys to challenge that.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing a story of demand from you with employers, which is very comforting, but sometimes that flies in the face of the news cycle.
Totally.
So tell us about it.
Yeah, so I think, obviously we're seeing a lot of larger organizations who are identifying opportunities for AI to take on a lot of the more entry level, more manual tasks that a lot of interns and a lot of new graduates depended on to get their foot in the door and to get that first initial experience and to get that experience to start to be able to work on more of the higher level, high value strategic activities. And I think that's where you're seeing the shift right now. And that's why we're feeling it. Those of us who are working in higher ed or working with youth or working with Gen Z and entry level work, that we're these individuals are feeling it, and they're out there trying to look for a lot of jobs that are just starting to shift, and a lot of companies are taking pause and starting to think through. What's really interesting, though, is that a lot of the higher level, more strategic activities, thinking through problems, innovating, identifying new opportunities for growth, and capitalizing on those. Those activities are still happening, and organizations are still going to grow. And they're still going to add more talent as they grow, as those opportunities that require more human skills that AI can only, can really can amplify, but can't necessarily replace. The challenge is like now this messy middle feels like it's becoming this gap, as you described it, Charlie, as many people do. It's becoming a chasm. I mean, it just feels like it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. It's growing. So how do we bridge that? Well, what's interesting in our world, the majority of the businesses that we work with, who are coming on and running these projects, they're actually small, medium businesses. They're micro businesses. In fact, the vast majority of them are under 50 employees, under 20 employees, or even under 10 employees. And they have been strapped for resources. They have, many of them, big visions, but access to capital, access to resources to hire talent hasn't necessarily been there. So these are the organizations who are now stepping in droves, if given the opportunity to be part of an education learning pathway where they're investing in being part of the learning, where they feel like the more that they put into it, the more they put into working with the students, the more that they're going to get out of it. They're coming to the table in droves. These projects, in many cases, help these organizations. They are not, when it comes to a project-based experience, one of the things that we often love about it is that there's no photocopying happening. There's no manual data entry happening here. These are not the kinds of projects that these are these more strategic, higher level deliverables because it's all based in the project format. And they're looking for a consultant who's being guided by a faculty member, taking what they're learning to come in. And often in these cases, in this era especially, a digital native who's pretty comfortable with AI. We all know small businesses are far behind larger organizations in adopting AI and trying to figure out how to leverage these new tools. And that combination is coming together and it's helping those organizations. Now, in many cases, those organizations are leveraging those projects. They're creating new opportunities that didn't exist before, meaning creating new jobs that didn't exist before. And now they have the talent, and they've identified the skills, and they have this really amazing opportunity to vet the talent while they prepare the talent. And that talent can then hit the floor running and they can convert that directly into an internship or another job. But in many cases, many of those small businesses, that might be all they do. They might only do the project. They win, they gain, they grow from that. They don't necessarily create a new role immediately from it, but they grow from it. But now that student, one of those rungs that was pulled away from a larger organization, they were able to get it from this smaller organization and get their foot in the door. And they're able now to articulate that to a larger organization. So the ecosystem is kind of shifting. The larger companies who used to satisfy the internship needs by hiring hundreds of internships, which in aggregate is millions and millions of internships. Many of those internship-like experiences, those first rung, the first foot in the door, may now need to be covered by these smaller organizations who have often felt left out before, but now are coming to the table and are super excited to be working with this level of talent to help them with these more strategic problems that they didn't have access to before.
Wow. So entry level has a different implication in that case. It's not kind of the negative news cycle of it. It's only 3 years. It's more like entry level comes in through a small to medium sized enterprise. And then if you decide to move on, you move to a larger enterprise, which has always kind of been the case. Larger enterprises always poach talent from smaller enterprises as the people get more experience. but that's the bridge across the
I think
chasm.
that's certainly something that we identified early on. Everyone sort of
Yeah.
thinks that we are solving this problem by getting, IBM to come on to Ripen and, take 5,000 of their employees off the floor to run 5,000 projects. But that's not how we grow. How we scale this is we get 5,000 small businesses. The wealth of opportunities in that smaller scale organization who are coming in where the students get real exposure to a real business owner. They can, actually see the impact of their work. They really get exposure to the kinds of things that the smaller business is thinking about. And I think, that aligns pretty well with a lot of the trends that we're seeing. With especially, when we started our business, we had all these advisors telling us it's never been, this is in 2012, it's never been an easier time for a young person coming out of higher education to start a business with access to capital and mentorship and tools. Now with AI, I mean, just like you were saying, Charlie, like you have assistants and agents. So I think we're going to see just an enormous amount of new innovations, new smaller businesses appear. And those smaller businesses are going to also need talent. They're going to need talent for more strategic stuff, talent to support the adoption of AI within their organizations. And so they're going to play a bigger role in getting the first rung of the ladder for the young talent, which is going to set them up for the more high level, high impact activities, which the larger businesses are still going to be hiring for.
Let's talk about Ripen a little bit here. Fascinating, Dana. I mean, I'm a huge fan, and I'm not just saying that you hear, and I've, Jeff and JC and others have heard me say it over again. I love that model in terms of helping, the incoming talent to gain real work experience while they're still in school, right? So that they can then hit the ground running, and it's obviously very beneficial for industry. Talk to us a little bit in terms of what has to happen for you guys in order for Ripen become sort of like the solution to solve the messy middle, and maybe if whatever you can share in terms of behind the curtain, what's your sort of growth strategy there?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's an exciting conversation to have. So, we're already really starting to see a lot of the trends. The most important trends that we're seeing out there are higher education institutions publicly, and internally committing to making experiential learning, work integrated learning, work-based learning a major pillar of their education offering. I was hanging out outside of one of our partner institutions earlier this year, and I saw a couple, and just waiting for my ride to arrive, and I saw the volunteer students going around and giving the high school students and their parents their tours of campus, and it was just like one group after another, and they had their big microphone on, and I wasn't really paying attention, but couldn't help but hear, and the students were pointing to every building and going, in this building we have this marketing class, and the students in this marketing class, they get to work with these kinds of companies. And there was a student in that marketing class who worked with this company, solved this challenge, got this kind of experience, and that led to this job. And then in this, building, there's this biology class where they work on these kinds of experiences. And then in this class, like everything they talked about was either internship, project-based experiences. And so what's interesting is that you've clearly learned that those volunteers have been hearing those questions. They're obviously coming out. That's what parents are asking about. That's what students are asking about. Prospective high school students are asking about. They know the reason. They're hearing it in the news. They're seeing it on the media. They know that experience is really important. They know that jobs are harder to get than ever. And so that shift is a very powerful trend that we're seeing. That is ultimately leading to higher education institutions at the leadership level, based on pressure from government, pressure from the public, pressure from the media, starting to commit to these kinds of work experiences, pressure from research that's coming out. Strata Education and Burning Glass released their Talent Disrupted report, which you referenced earlier. Business Higher Education Forum released their Internship Expanded report recently. This is really showcasing that these experiences are one of the highest ROI, highest impact experiences that learners can participate in throughout their education pathway. And so that is a massive trend. And that is what we need at our level to start to work with those leadership to help create a transformational change within these academic institutions. Because ultimately, employers are not our limiting factor. I mentioned earlier, We oversubscribe the employer side. They're signing up in droves. They're excited to be part of the learning journey. They're excited for a co-learning experience, learning a lot alongside the students, offering context, looking for this win-win, win kind of engagement. It's really getting the academic side and faculty members willing and open to opening up their courses and saying, "Hey, industry, you know what? You're invited in. Come on in. Let's teach this together. Let's learn together. Let's make mistakes together. Let's figure out how we can improve our curriculum and the way that we teach our students to better set them up for success." Less of this like industry advisors. I really think it's great that a lot of academic institutions have these groups and industry advisory groups, but they're not getting into the classroom. They're not working with faculty members. They're not working with students and actually providing and creating a feedback loop on a course by course basis, semester by semester basis, where there's never ending continuous improvement. So I would say like that's what we really need to have. You asked about behind the curtain, so I'll share. There's a couple things that are super interesting that are coming out right now. So one is we've been partnering with government who have been creating these. So this is sort of coming from the top level, realizing that they're making huge investments into higher education institutions, and that investment, they want to make sure that it pays off. At the state level, they want to make sure that individuals who go into higher education and take advantage of these investments that they've made come out, contribute to the economy, fill talent gaps, help grow industry, help grow the economy, help attract businesses and help retain businesses, and ultimately help attract talent and retain talent in the ecosystem. That's how you create, a thriving, economy. And they're, have been investing in workforce development programs and wage subsidy programs for forever, and incentives to encourage more employers to invest in these kinds of early talent initiatives. And so we've partnered with them to create models where we can actually act as the payment facilitator of a paid internship program, a micro internship program, where we open it up, students come, they participate, they complete 60-hour projects, they get paid for those projects. We manage all of the paperwork. We do all the reporting back to the government. We can show the impact on the learners. We can show the impact on the employers and their productivity gains and their job creation and the jobs that are coming out of these experiences. And then that helps feed even more investment into these programs because they start to realize that the ROI is so powerful. So that we've been doing for some time now. We've now built the functionality for companies to just come in, because those programs completely oversubscribe. The employers sign up again in droves. There's an overabundance of employers who want to participate. So now we built the capacity that companies can come in, they can just put their credit card in, and they can just say, I want to pay students directly for these programs. So we can now start to build those programs around the faculty engagement, and students can do this as part of the curriculum, and then students can do these paid micro experiences outside of the curriculum. And then last of all, I'll just say, or not last of all, there's lots of other engagements that we're doing, but the other really innovative thing that we are super excited about is more academic institutions are coming to us and saying, we love the model of working with individual faculty members and taking one course at a time and converting that course to one of these work-based learning courses. But, that's doing 50 students at a time, 100 students at a time, 300 students at a time. Could we scale this to 10,000 students at a time or 30,000 students at a time, depending on the size of the institution? And again, that's not our limiting capacity. Of course we could. You just show us a class where we can have the opportunity to work with a program to do that. And so this new model is where our academic institutions are identifying a course code, and they're saying, hey, let's co-teach this course with a Riipen, and let's make it totally open enrollment. Any student across the academic institution can participate in that course. And we'll make it completely interdisciplinary, which is fantastic, because then you have students from different backgrounds, different areas of study being formed into groups, working on these projects, bringing different skill sets, and solving these problems together. And we're getting to those classes getting to those students super early on and exposing them to these types of project experience at scale, because that, again, scale is not our limiting factor. It's just access to the students in an environment like this. And then the best part about that, it's a virtuous circle. The more that we do as part of those types of programs, the more faculty members we attract for the cohort-based experiences. So it just rapidly accelerates the number of employers who want to participate, and then that whole transformational change across the entire academic institution.
Holy moly. Here's what I'm going to say. If any of our friends at the New York Times are listening today, you guys need to include Dana's perspective, the Ripen lens, the Ripen window, because that's going to give people hope and lessen the fear and anger that's out there. Dana, that's all we have time for today. I know we were fortunate. We're over the time we promised to spend with you. Love to bring you back, but thank you so
Absolutely.
much. I mean, I can't even list the ideas that you shared with us today and how special it's been. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Well, thank you very
Well,
much, Jeff.
it's our pleasure. I would love to spend a lot more time geeking out with you. I've got so many questions in mind. I know I'm going to have to hold my powder dry for now, but I will say to everybody out there listening, thank you for listening. I hope you can take these great concepts that Dana's articulated to heart and connect with Ripen. This has been the Job Ready podcast. You can find us on effa.io/job ready. And, I'm Jeff Nelder.
And I'm Charlie Nguyen.
And thank you all for listening. Thank you, Dana. And we hope
Thanks,
you have
Dana.
we hope you all have a wonderful day. Over and out.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.